It's a cold winter evening in 1568. A rider races through the English countryside, his horse's hooves thundering against the frozen ground. He carries news that will shake the kingdom. Mary, Queen of Scots, has fled to England. She begs for help from her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. This isn't just any royal visitor asking for shelter. Mary is Elizabeth's greatest rival, a woman who claims she should be England's queen too. She's younger than Elizabeth, famous for her beauty, and loved by English Catholics who want their old faith back. Now she stands at Elizabeth's door, asking for protection. Elizabeth sits alone in her private chamber, reading Mary's desperate letter. The candlelight flickers across her face as she thinks about what to do. Help Mary, and she might be protecting someone who wants to take her crown. Turn her away, and people might think she's weak and heartless. Either choice could change both their lives forever. What would you do, Mother? Elizabeth whispers to the empty room, thinking of Anne Boleyn, who died when Elizabeth was just a child. She knows better than anyone how dangerous the game of power can be. Her own mother lost her head to it. The fire crackles in the hearth as Elizabeth's advisors argue. William Cecil, her most trusted helper, warns of danger. Your Majesty, remember how the Catholics rise up in her name, he says carefully. With her in England, she is my cousin, Elizabeth cuts him off, and a queen. But even as she says it, she remembers all the times Mary has claimed the English crown for herself. Elizabeth stands at her window, watching the sun set over London. Somewhere out there, Mary waits to hear if she'll find safety or rejection. The choice Elizabeth makes tonight will start a chain of events that neither queen can stop. The messenger waits in the courtyard below, his cloak pulled tight against the winter cold. Soon he'll ride back with Elizabeth's answer, an answer that will change England forever. 2 queens, 1 throne, and a decision that will echo through time. Their story begins now. Thunder shakes the walls of Greenwich Palace one September morning in 1533. Inside the Queen's room, where candles flicker and cast dancing shadows, a baby's first cry fills the air. The baby is healthy and strong, but there's a problem. She isn't the son King Henry VIII wanted. The midwives wrap the newborn in golden cloth as her mother reaches for her. "My Elizabeth," whispers Anne Boleyn, holding her daughter close. "You'll be greater than any son." She doesn't know that in 3 years she'll be dead at the king's command, leaving her little girl alone in a dangerous world. 3-year-old Elizabeth stands at a window, her red gold hair shining in the firelight. Below in the castle yard, her mother's ladies are crying. Elizabeth doesn't understand why, but she feels how everything has changed, like a cold wind has blown through her world. "Lady Bryan," she asks her nurse in a small voice, "when is Mama coming back?" Her nurse's hands shake as she fixes Elizabeth's dress. "Come away from the window, my lady." But Elizabeth keeps watching. Even this young, she's learning how to survive. Watch everything, remember everything. She sees how the servants don't bow as low anymore, how her pretty dresses disappear one by one, how her father's new queen, Jane Seymour, never looks her in the eye. That night, looking in her mirror, Elizabeth makes a promise to herself. "I'll be as great a queen as Mama wanted me to be." She doesn't know it yet, but this child's promise will change a country. Away from the royal court, Elizabeth shows everyone how clever she is. Her teachers are amazed by how quickly she learns languages. During the day, she studies Latin and Greek, carefully tracing the words with her finger. At night, she lies in her bed at Hatfield House, listening to the servants talk, learning about the dangerous game of power being played around her. 9 years after Elizabeth's birth, another royal baby is born. In Scotland's Linlithgow Palace, while winter winds howl outside, Mary Stuart takes her first breath. Her father, King James V, is dying in another room. When they tell him his new baby is a girl, he turns away sadly and says, "It came with a lass, and it will pass with a lass." He dies just days later, and baby Mary becomes Queen of Scots before she can even open her eyes. But Mary's mother, Mary of Guise, has a plan. While Scotland fights over religion and power, she sends her daughter to France. 5-year-old Mary waves goodbye to Scotland, a country she'll spend her whole life trying to understand. The French court is like a beautiful garden where young Mary blooms. Sunlight streams through tall windows as she practices her dancing. Her uncle, the Duke of Guise, watches proudly as she moves gracefully across the floor. "Again, my dear," calls her dance teacher, and Mary spins perfectly, her friend Mary Fleming following her steps. Later in her room, Mary sits while her nurse, Lady Fleming, brushes her dark hair. "Tell me about Scotland," she asks, like she does every night. "Tell me about my kingdom." "Your kingdom waits for its true queen," Lady Fleming says softly. The hills are purple with heather, proud castles touch the sky, and people sing songs about the Stuart kings. Mary closes her eyes and dreams. In her mind, Scotland is like a fairy tale, nothing like the real place where people fight over religion and power. And my mother, is she okay? She keeps Scotland safe for you, dear one. She fights the English, keeps the nobles in line. Lady Fleming stops talking, not mentioning the riots in Edinburgh, the burning churches, or the whispers of rebellion that reach even France. While Mary's life is full of music and happiness, Elizabeth lives in a world of secrets. One day she walks in the gardens of Hatfield House, her feet crunching on frozen gravel. She's just heard that Mary has married the French prince. Her advisors watch her carefully, wondering what she thinks about this news. They say she's beautiful, one courtier says, the star of the French court. Elizabeth touches a white rose covered in frost. Beauty fades, she says quietly, thinking of her mother. But wisdom grows stronger. She picks the rose and pricks her finger. A drop of blood appears, red against her skin. Tell me, Master Cecil, what's happening with the Protestants in Scotland? William Cecil, who's becoming her most trusted advisor, steps forward. They're getting restless, Your Highness. They look to England for help. How interesting, Elizabeth says with a sharp smile. My cousin Mary makes friends with Catholics while her Protestant people look to England. She drops the rose on the frosty ground. We'll watch and wait. We've learned to be patient, haven't we? The two young queens, who've never met but share the same royal blood, are growing up very differently. Elizabeth learns not to trust anyone completely, to hide her feelings, to be careful with every word and action. She builds walls around her heart, using silence and caution like other people use bricks and mortar. Meanwhile, Mary grows up believing in love and loyalty. She learns that a queen can follow her heart, that people will follow you if they love you, that being charming is as important as being smart. As winter comes to both countries, the two queens stand at the edge of their futures. In France, Mary dances at her wedding, her young husband Francis looking at her with love. The candlelight makes her jewels sparkle like stars, and she feels like nothing can stop her. In England, Elizabeth kneels in her private chapel with her prayer book. But she's not praying. She's thinking about her sister Mary's failing health, about becoming queen herself, about her cousin across the sea who might try to take her crown. God give us wisdom, she whispers, but she knows wisdom might not be enough. The game is starting, and both queens will have to play their parts. One queen believes in love and faith, the other in being careful and clever. Soon they'll find out which way of thinking helps a queen survive in a world that thinks women too weak to rule. On the River Thames, ice breaks with a sound like breaking glass. Winter holds England and Scotland in its cold grip, and two queens get ready for a spring that will bring either victory or disaster. Church bells ring through the foggy London streets in November 1558. Queen Mary Y, King Henry's daughter, is dead. Now a young woman with red gold hair takes the crown, Elizabeth Tudor. The same Elizabeth who was once called a bastard is now England's queen. People line the streets to see her ride through London. They shout, "God save the Queen," but many wonder if this woman, whose mother was executed as a traitor, can really rule their country. Elizabeth feels their doubts like sharp arrows, but she doesn't show it. At her crowning in Westminster Abbey, she kneels as they place the heavy crown on her head. Her voice rings clear as she makes her promise. "I will be a good queen to all my people." She means every word, no matter what it might cost her. Meanwhile, across the sea, another queen faces her own challenge. Mary Stuart stands on a ship heading to Scotland. She wears black because she's mourning her husband, the young King of France, who just died. She's only 18, but she's already been Queen of France. Now she's going home to rule Scotland, a country she barely knows because she left it as a little girl. The Scotland Mary finds is nothing like the France she left behind. The Catholic ways she loves are disappearing, replaced by strict Protestant beliefs. The Scottish nobles watch her like hungry wolves. They see her French manners, her Catholic faith, and her youth, and they think she's weak. But Mary has her own kind of strength. She can make people love her just by talking to them. She believes God chose her to be queen, and she desperately wants to prove she can rule. In England, Elizabeth builds her power carefully and slowly, like a spider making its web. She chooses clever advisors, William Cecil, who's smart and careful, and Robert Dudley, who's completely loyal to her. When Parliament keeps asking her to get married, she turns it into a show. "I am married to England," she tells them, touching her coronation ring. But when she's alone, she touches another ring, one that Robert Dudley gave her, and thinks about how queens can't always follow their hearts. Mary takes a different path. She follows her heart and marries Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley. On paper, it looks perfect, They're both related to the English royal family, which makes their claim to England's throne stronger. But Darnley turns out to be like a snake hiding in beautiful clothes. He gets drunk and cruel, wanting more power than Mary will give him. Then something terrible happens. Mary's friend and secretary, David Rizzio, is murdered right in front of her. Darnley's men hold her back while others stab Rizzio. Something breaks in Mary that night. Her belief that love can conquer all. Then comes the night that changes everything. A huge explosion rocks Edinburgh, and they find Darnley dead in the garden. Everyone starts whispering about murder. When Mary marries the Earl of Bothwell just weeks later, the man many people think killed Darnley, those whispers turn into angry shouts. The nobles rise up against her. They lock their queen in a room and force her to give up her crown to her baby son. Mary's hands shake as she signs the paper, her tears falling on it. She escapes a few days later and tries to raise an army, but it falls apart in her final battle. She has only one choice left: run to England, to her cousin Elizabeth, the only person who might understand what it's like to be a queen in trouble. But Elizabeth understands too well. When Mary's desperate letter asking for help arrives, Elizabeth sees more than just a cousin who needs help. She sees a threat to everything she's built. Mary is Catholic, beautiful, and has a claim to England's throne. She's everything Elizabeth's enemies have been praying for, and now she's here asking for protection. Two queens, two crowns. Two very different women learning the hard truth. In a world ruled by men, a queen's power is as fragile as glass, and when it breaks, it can cut just as deep. A single candle burns in Elizabeth's private room at Richmond Palace. The year is 1586, and her spy chief, Francis Walsingham, stands before her with letters that will decide a queen's life. His network of spies has caught secret messages that tell a dangerous story, and they all point to one person, Mary Stuart. For 19 years, Mary has lived as England's most important prisoner. Her rooms look like a queen's chambers, with beautiful furniture and tapestries, but the windows have iron bars, and every servant watches her every move for Walsingham. But even in prison, Mary finds ways to fight back. She hides messages in her sewing and whispers plans to visitors who carry her words to Catholics who dream of seeing her free. Elizabeth watches this dangerous game from afar, moving Mary from castle to castle like a chess piece. Each time Catholic rebels rise up in Mary's name, each time foreign kings threaten England's shores, Elizabeth makes Mary's prison tighter. But she hesitates to take the final step. She is a queen, she reminds her advisors when they push for execution, and she is my blood. But family ties mean nothing to Anthony Babington, a young Catholic man who dreams of making Mary queen. He writes to her in secret code about a dangerous plan. 6 men will kill Elizabeth, and then Mary can take the crown. Mary writes back saying, "I approve," not knowing that Walsingham's men have already broken their secret code and can read every word. Now Elizabeth holds the proof in her shaking hands. Her own cousin has agreed to her murder. As she reads the letters, she remembers the desperate woman who once came to her for help. Now she must choose: show mercy to her cousin or protect her throne. The trial that follows is just for show. Everyone knows how it will end. Mary faces her judges wearing a black dress that stands out against the gray stone walls. "I am a queen," she declares, her voice strong and proud. "I answer only to God." But the judges have already decided she must die. On a cold February morning in 1587, Mary walks to her death with the same grace she once showed at French court dances. She dresses for her execution as carefully as she once dressed for parties, in bright red, the color Catholic martyrs wear. Her ladies cry as they help her remove her black outer dress, showing the red beneath. "Don't cry," she tells them. "I die a queen, even if I die in England." The axe falls. In death, Mary becomes what she perhaps was always meant to be: a martyr, a symbol, a story people will tell forever. When Elizabeth hears the news, she explodes in anger, saying she never meant for the execution to happen so quickly. But it's too late. One queen has fallen, the other must live with what she's done. The consequences come fast. Spain's King Philip II has been looking for a reason to attack England, and now he has one. He sends his great armada, the biggest fleet of warships anyone has ever seen. Elizabeth, now in her 50s, puts on armor and rides out to inspire her soldiers at Tilbury. "I know I have a woman's body," she tells them, "but I have the heart of a king." The sea battles that follow become legend. England's smaller, faster ships dance around the huge Spanish warships. When the fighting ends, Spain's mighty armada lies broken. Some ships at the bottom of the sea, others scattered by storms. Elizabeth has won her greatest victory, but victory comes with a price. Two queens played this deadly game. One chose survival over mercy, power over family ties. The other chose faith over compromise, following her heart instead of her head. In the end, maybe they were both prisoners, one of her crown, the other of her beliefs. The game is over. But their story echoes through history, teaching us about the cost of power and the wounds that never heal. Elizabeth kept her throne, but had to send her own cousin to death to do it. Mary lost her crown and her life, but never gave up her beliefs or her right to be queen. Both women paid a heavy price for power, in a world that wasn't ready for queens to rule. Winter sunlight streams through the windows of Richmond Palace, casting long shadows in an old queen's room. Elizabeth Tudor, once as bright as fire, now sits alone among her mirrors. Her famous red hair has turned white under her wig, and she wears white makeup to hide her age. The year is 1603, and the great Queen Elizabeth is dying. She refuses to lie in bed. "To rest is to rust," she snaps at her ladies, even though she can barely stand. Instead, she stays on her feet for hours, then sits on cushions when she gets too tired. In quiet moments, her thoughts drift to Mary, her rival, her prisoner, her cousin. She wonders if she made the right choice all those years ago. History will judge her decisions, but history wasn't there when she had to choose between showing mercy and keeping her throne safe. The court whispers around her, as it always has. But now they whisper about the future, about who will wear England's crown when she's gone. She sees the irony. Mary's son, James of Scotland, will probably become king after her. This means that in death, Mary will win what she couldn't in life. Her son will rule both kingdoms. Elizabeth's mind wanders through her memories like walking through a picture gallery. She sees herself young again, dancing at Richmond with Robert Dudley watching her every move. She remembers her triumph against the Spanish Armada, the love of her people, and the golden age that bloomed during her reign. Shakespeare wrote his plays, Drake sailed around the world, and England grew stronger than ever before. But now she knows that power comes with a price: loneliness. In her final hours, she sits silently, refusing food and medicine. Her advisors crowd around, begging her to name who should be king after her. But the queen who built her rule on careful words knows when to stay silent. Only at the very end does she hint that James should be king, with just a simple gesture. Then she turns her face to the wall, like Mary's father did so long ago, and quietly slips away from the crown that was both her strength and her prison. They bury her in Westminster Abbey with all the ceremony she deserves. And there, in death's final joke, she rests near Mary, the two queens who could never live together peacefully, now lying forever under the same roof. Their tombs tell different stories. Elizabeth celebrates the maiden queen who never married, while Mary speaks of martyrdom and motherhood. Yet both remind us of what women must pay for power. James VI of Scotland becomes James I of England, uniting the crowns as his mother had dreamed. He orders Mary's body moved to Westminster Abbey, giving her in death the royal honor she wanted in life. Elizabeth and Mary, once rivals for a throne, now share the peace they never found while living. Their story echoes through time, teaching us about the price of power. Elizabeth chose her crown over love, survival over mercy, and died alone but triumphant. Mary chose passion over politics, heart over head, and died a prisoner but never broke in spirit. Both were queens, both were women. Both had to create new rules for roles that had always belonged to men. Maybe they were more alike than different. Two strong women trying to survive in a world that wasn't ready for their strength. Their legacy lives on not just in history books, but in every woman who dares to claim her power, who must choose between what her heart wants and what she must do to survive. The bells toll for the end of an era. The Tudor rose has faded, the Stuart star rises. But the story of these two queens, their rivalry, their choices, their triumphs and tragedies, will be told as long as people gather to share tales of power, passion, and the price we pay for both. In the end, both queens left their mark on history. Elizabeth proved a woman could rule as well as any king, creating a golden age that people would remember for centuries. Mary showed that a queen could face defeat and death without losing her dignity or her faith. Together, they changed what it meant to be a woman in power. And perhaps that's their greatest legacy. Not the battles they fought or the choices they made, but the paths they opened for future generations. They showed that women could be more than wives and mothers. They could be rulers, warriors, and makers of history. The price they paid was high, but the door they opened would never fully close again.